race will replace retiring Judge John Lorman. And as an attorney myself, I want to take a moment and thank Judge Lorman for his years of distinguished service to our county. This is a nonpartisan position, meaning that candidates do not claim a political affiliation, and no political affiliation will appear next to their names on your ballots. The candidates for this position in alphabetical order are Brandon Johnson and Mike Mitchell. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Brandon Johnson, who has 2 minutes to deliver his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Bertha, and thank you all for the opportunity to be here this evening. I began my legal career in public service over 20 years ago and would like to return to public service here at home. I graduated from Walla and then Washington State University with a degree in criminal justice. I don't come from a legacy of attorneys. My desire to be a lawyer stems from my desire to help people. I loved law school at Gonzaga and I excelled there. I got good grades, was an editor on Law Review, and graduated second in my class. During school, I was an intern at the Court of Appeals. After graduation, I was a law clerk for a judge at the same court. Working at the court exposed me to all types of Washington law, both criminal and civil. My job was to research and help the judges make decisions and draft opinions. It also gave me an appreciation for the sense of purpose and professional satisfaction of working for a common goal, to get to the right result. Not to win, not to make money, not to make a name for myself. It planted the seeds for my desire to serve Walla County now. Later in private practice, I did civil litigation of all kinds, drafted contracts, real estate matters, estate planning, and probate. I also represented clients in criminal matters. From 2010 to 2014, while I was an attorney at Minnecaner, I was counsel of record in 250 cases filed in Walla County Superior Court. I began serving as a mediator 9 years ago, helping parties reach agreements to keep them out of litigation. I found it very rewarding and something I was good at. 5 years ago, I became a full-time mediator and arbitrator. Since then, I have conducted over 500 mediations and nearly 50 arbitrations. In 2016, I began serving as a judge pro tem for the Walla Superior Court. Spending the last 5 years approaching cases from a neutral aspect has prepared me for this position. I graduated from law school 20 years ago and have 20 years of career ahead of me. I have the energy, enthusiasm, experience, and education that is needed to best serve Walla County as its next Superior Court judge.
Thank you very much. Mike, to you. You have 2 minutes to deliver your opening remarks.
Thank you, Bertha, for the opportunity to speak to you and the others in the audience. For those who don't know me, I was born and raised in Walla. My father was a sports editor at the UB, my mother a homemaker. I'm married, my wife Liz, and I have 4 children, Kelsey, Kyle, Ryan, and Jenny. Collectively, we have 9 grandchildren who keep us busy. I was educated here in Walla at Green Park Elementary, Pioneer Junior High, and Walla High School. I ended up going to Whitman College for a year, and then Walla Community College for a couple of quarters, and ended up where Brandon ended up at Washington State, where I graduated in 1975. I thereafter went to Willamette College of Law in Salem, Oregon, and graduated from Willamette in 1978. At that time, I was able to get a job here at the Walla County Prosecutor's Office working for Art Eggers, which allowed me to spend a lot of time in court doing jury trials and criminal work. I was there for about 4 years when I joined the firm of Roach, Votendahl, and Monahan, where I ultimately became a partner in the late 1980s. In 1989, I went out on my own, and I've had a sole practice now for a little over 30 years, sharing office space for the last 25 years with Larry Siegel. In 2005, I became a mediator, which sort of evolved into also arbitration. I've been involved in that field for about 15 years. In 2009, they asked me to be a court commissioner, and in 2013, I was appointed the Walla County Superior Court Commissioner. I've served in that function for the last roughly 8 years. I have significant trial and judicial experience, and I'm ready to serve the citizens of Walla County. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to start with our first topic, which is judicial temperament. As both of you know, as practicing attorneys, The temperament of a judge sets the tone of the courtroom and directly affects the interaction between the judge and the legal advocates, as well as the parties to the case. Please describe in detail, and we're going to start first with you, Brandon, what you feel is ideal judicial temperament and what you think your temperament would be like if you were elected to the bench.
I agree that temperament is very important. It is an intangible element of the job that is just as important as being smart. I believe an ideal judicial temperament is one that demonstrates being prepared, patient, empathetic, and firmly in control of the courtroom and procedure while still demonstrating respect to all parties. My goal, if elected, is to exhibit those traits every day on the bench. Serving as a mediator and arbitrator on a full-time basis for the last 5 years has sharpened my empathy and active listening skills. I have also had to make difficult decisions as an arbitrator and explain those decisions to the parties. Delivering an adverse decision in a respectful and understandable way is an important part of judicial temperament. Parties deserve to feel that they have been heard, even if their position is not adopted by the court. I was raised to treat the custodian the same way you treat the CEO. I have myself had jobs pushing a broom. I will treat everyone who appears before the court with dignity and respect.
Thank you. Mike, too, you have 60 seconds.
Thank you. I don't think it'll take that long. I think there are a few quality traits that all judges that I've been in front of, I've tried to take from them and utilize when I've been on the bench. I think a judge has to be calm and even-tempered. I think you're correct, Bertha, that the judge sets the tone. If the judge is frantic, the rest of the people in the courtroom are frantic, and that's no good. More than anything, a judge has to be respectful of the people who appear in front of him or her, but also there's a need that they are respectful of the court. And so I have endeavored to encourage that and do that when I've been on the bench. Lastly, and maybe most importantly, the court has to be willing to listen to all sides. And I think if you have those qualities, you'll end up being a very good judge. Thank you.
Thank you. And Brandon, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal. You may waive it if you wish, or you can expound a little bit more.
Well, I certainly don't have anything to rebut because I think Mike and I agree completely on what the appropriate judicial temperament is. I've been blessed in my career to experience that firsthand. You know, Judge Zagalo exemplified being prepared all the time. Half the time he could give you your argument before you ever opened your mouth. Judge Schott always did a wonderful job of controlling the courtroom in a respectful way, where the parties did feel respected, and yet there was no doubt about who was in control of his courtroom.
Thank you. And Mike, would you like 30 more seconds?
I would. I was blessed to have an uncle who actually served as Superior Court judge here in Walla County in the 70s and 80s, and he in my opinion, epitomized respect in his courtroom and the way he handled himself. And I've been hoping to act the same way as he did when I watched him on the bench. It was he did a quality job. I've had people tell me that I am much like him.
Thank you. Moving on now to talk about judicial character. Please describe, and we're going to start with Mike on this question, please describe your firsthand experience in dealing with people who are different from you socially, economically, and politically. Do you think that you can deal with people different from you without a bias?
Well, first of all, a court cannot show any bias. That's in the Code of Judicial Conduct. I look back on I was blessed to have an athletic career, and during that career, I was on many teams, and many of those teams had kids and friends from all races and socioeconomic backgrounds, and we were a team. We did things together. We relied on each other. Those were things that I rely on when I deal with others. I've dealt with others in many different ways, and I expect that there would be no bias in my courtroom, and I would demand that there would be no bias in my courtroom. Thank you.
Brandon, to you.
Growing up, I was lucky to have relationships and friends from all backgrounds, jocks, nerds, geeks, and stoners. I treated everyone the same then, and I do the same now. I've had clients from all walks of life, social class, and education level. Conducting 500 mediations over the last 5 years has exposed me to even more diversity, from wealthy folks arguing over their summer home and stock portfolios to less fortunate folks contemplating bankruptcy and how to divide up their credit card debt. Minimizing bias requires intentionality. I believe we are all products of our environment to at least some extent. I believe that my life experience and my years of representing parties, mediating, arbitrating, and acting as a judge pro tem has helped me understand that everyone has a story. I will always strive to treat everyone equally and with dignity and respect.
Thank you, Mike, to you, 30 seconds.
Over the course of practicing over 40 years, I've had clients from every walk of life, every race, every socioeconomic background. I have friends today from lots of different races and socioeconomic positions. I would like to think those have all molded me into who I am now and what I can be on the bench.
And Brandon, you can close us out of this question if you wish.
I would just restate that I think that minimizing bias, and Mike's right, it's in the judicial code that judges are not to be biased, but I think it takes intentionality, and that's something that I would strive to do at all times.
Thank you. The next question is about access to the legal system. And we're going to start with Brandon on this question. Do you believe that there is adequate access to legal help in our local legal system? And if you don't, what are your ideas for providing wider access to legal services for indigent people in, for example, family law cases and for victims of domestic violence?
To be blunt, no. Access to justice in the court system is a statewide issue, and unfortunately, Walla Walla is no exception. Agencies like the Blue Mountain Action Council and Northwest Justice Project play a critical role in providing legal services for indigent citizens. Increasing local attorney participation in pro bono representation would be very helpful. Providing services to the less economically fortunate has always been important to me. In 2009, I was named Pro Bono Attorney of the Year by BMAC and the Walla Walla County Bar Association. In my mediation practice, I frequently work with parties by taking payments in order to make mediation more accessible. I would like to see attorneys receiving continuing legal education credits for their pro bono work. I would also advocate for increased funding for the court facilitator position so that the hours of assistance could be increased.
Thank you. Mike, to you, 60 seconds.
I echo a lot of what Brandon just said. I think legal access is problematic. Attorney affordability is a problem for a lot of people. And even attorney access is a problem for a lot of people. Because in some places, there just aren't that many attorneys to access. Legal aid is very, very helpful, and they do a tremendous job. The court facilitators that we currently have are wonderful. They work hard. They try and help people who are who do not have attorneys, but they need help, and it's a question of funding, like a lot of things are. I see a lot of pro se litigants in front of me. I handle a domestic violence docket every Friday, and the majority of those are self-represented. And so we have to work with those individuals when they're in court so that they have an opportunity to state their case and we listen.
Brandon, to you.
The other thing I would add is I think this is an issue where technology can be helpful as well. For example, video appearances for folks who are working so they don't miss time from work and further compound financial stress. I think we need to be creative and do everything we can to make sure that access to the courts is not a barrier.
And Mike, you can close us out of this question if you wish.
I have nothing further to say. Thank you.
Our next question is with regards to women and people of color in our court system. And Mike, we're going to start with you on this question. Do you believe that there's an underrepresentation or meaningful integration of women and people of color in the court system? And if so, do you feel that you have or would have a role in correcting this problem, and what would your actions be?
When I started practicing in the late 1970s, there clearly was a underrepresentation of both women and people of color. Largely, I think that's disappearing with women as it should be. Maybe not quite so quickly with people of color, but that's changing as well. Our society has changed much over those years, but it can still be a problem. Insofar as what I could do as a judge to encourage or increase that, I'm not sure there's a lot a judge can do, other than be supportive of those individuals who want to appear as attorneys or litigants from any particular race or gender. They have that right. Everyone has the right to access to justice.
Brandon, to you, 60 seconds.
Yes, I believe the court system is a microcosm of our society as a whole, where statistics would show that women and people of color are frequently paid less and provided less opportunities in both employment and education. The court is not, however, a policymaker. The court's role is that of an umpire, calling balls and strikes. The court must treat every party appearing before it equally and with respect, and I will do just that if elected. In terms of correction, the judge can take steps to make sure that all actors in the court system treat parties fairly and equally, to ensure that the courtrooms of Walla County do not perpetuate inequality in any form or manner. I would pledge to participate in whatever trainings are offered to be intentional when it comes to these important issues.
Thank you. And to you, Mike?
I guess I would say that in the years that I've practiced, I have not seen that sort of thing happen in our courtrooms. Having said that, if people are treated unfairly in my courtroom, it doesn't last very long. Everyone is equal in every courtroom from my perspective and should be given the respect that anybody else has to state their case.
And Brandon, to you to close us out of this question.
I would echo what Mike said. You know, the important part is that the court treat everyone equally, that everyone who darkens the door of the courtroom feels like they're being given the same opportunity and shown the same respect and dignity as anyone else.
Thank you. Our next question is about court operations and efficiency. And we're going to start with Brandon on this question. Our local court system depends on court staff to run smoothly and efficiently. What is working in our local court to improve court procedures and efficiency? And what other methods would you suggest to make it better?
Technology is being adopted to make things more efficient. For example, video appearances from the local jail, and now court hearings over Zoom. Changes to the local rules regarding deadlines for filings and family law matters have also helped with efficiency. Increased technology will continue to improve operations. Some of the changes adopted now due to the pandemic may be retained long-term. The local rules can also be examined on a regular basis. Judge Lorman began a review of the local rules in 2014 that resulted in amendments being adopted in 2016. The number of parties representing themselves has continued to increase. Increased hours for the court facilitator position would help to ensure that mandated forms are completed correctly, which makes dockets run more smoothly. Mediation and arbitration help resolve matters outside of court. Retired Judge Zagalo's policy of requiring mediation has been continued, and I would do the same, as well as continuing to offer pretrial settlement conferences.
Thank you. Mike, from you.
I guess I would first state that having worked in the court system for a long time and on the bench for a number of years now, I find our current staff tremendous in the sense that they work very hard to try and make things work. What has really created a problem in the last 6 or 7 months is the COVID situation, because we simply haven't had the ability to appear in person in court, which is what everyone was used to prior to that time. In-person appearances are better from my perspective as a judge, because I can better look at how people testify or argue and draw conclusions from that, which is difficult to do on Zoom. Jury trials will require increased staffing. Those are all funding things the commissioners are going to have to deal with. We've talked about doing jury trials at the fairgrounds. So all of these things are going to have to be dealt with pretty quickly.
Thank you. Brandon, your response?
I agree with Mike that the staff that we have is phenomenal. That's, to be honest, one of the reasons that I'm running for this position. I really enjoyed my time at the Court of Appeals, working as part of a team where the goal was to get things right. I know that's exactly what happens in Walla County, and I look forward to serving in that role.
And to you, Mike, if you wish.
I have no follow-up. Thank you.
The next question is with regards to serving Spanish-speaking litigants, Spanish-speaking parties. Over 25% of Walla County's population is Hispanic. What is your, and we're going to start with Mike on this question, what is your assessment of how our local court system is doing in serving Spanish speakers at every level of the case, from filing the case at the clerk's office to final judgment?
I guess I would start out by saying that it is a problem, because you are correct. There are more Spanish-speaking people availing themselves of the court system, which is a good thing. On the other hand, in order to address this, there needs to be people who are bilingual and interpreters, especially in the courtroom. They need to be certified interpreters. And those interpreters have to be able to repeat the questions and the answers verbatim, not in narrative form. And those quality people are few and far between, so it's been difficult to address that. We do have the ability to go through the office of the Administrative Office of Courts. There's a landline where we can get interpreters for any language, Hispanic, Russian, Tagalog, whatever. And that's been very helpful. We use that a number of times, but it is a problem.
Thank you. Brandon, to you, 60 seconds.
I think we can always do better to strive and find more ways to improve access for parties whose primary language is not English. Making sure that court forms and court procedure are presented in Spanish and easy to find is important. The court now does a good job of making sure that interpreters are available, but I agree with Mike, having access to more would certainly be better. I believe interpreters should also be available in the clerk's office to assist with filing documents and seeking ex parte emergency orders, and ensuring that interpreters are a part of the court facilitator process is also key. I believe this is also another area where technology can play a role. Translation technology continues to improve, both for written documents and audio. At the end of the day, it is critical that language not be a barrier to access justice, and I will do all I can, if elected, to see that it is not in Walla County.
Thank you. To you, Mike, 30 seconds.
I will say that over the course of my time as an attorney here and on the bench, things have gotten better, but it needs to go a little faster. I would agree with that. And like a lot of things, it's largely or sometimes a function of money. And I know people get tired of hearing that, but it is. And so those are things that are going to have to be dealt with, not only by the courts, but also by the commissioner's office and the state office. Thank you.
Thank you. And Brandon, you can close us out of this question.
I agree with Mike that funding is so often the issue. Cynically, you can say the answer to all of your questions is money, and this is no exception. But I also agree with Mike that it is a problem, and we need to fight hard to make sure that the necessary funding is put into place, because this is such an important issue.
Thank you very much. We have some audience questions coming through, which I want to get to. I want to remind everybody that's watching tonight live to please submit your questions through the Q&A feature. We will get to as many as we can. We have about 15 minutes left. We also want to have some time for closing statements, but I want to pose this audience question to you first, Brandon, and it's about systemic racism in our justice system. Specifically, what do you think your role will be as a judge in combating the systemic racism that exists in our judicial system?
Well, as I said before, the Superior Court's role is not one of policymaking. The job of the Superior Court is more of an umpire, to call balls and strikes. And you can handle the cases that are before you, and then you can do the best you can under the circumstances. And so it would be my practice to do everything in my power to make sure that the Superior Court that I preside over is one that is free of bias. And again, I believe that requires intentionality, whether that means attending diversity trainings or other types of trainings. I would do everything I could to be intentional about that and not passive.
Thank you. Mike, to you.
I would think it's pretty simple. If I was on the bench and I saw systemic racism or any sort of racism occurring in my courtroom, I'd call it out. I mean, I think it's incumbent upon any judge to do that. Having said that, it is sometimes difficult to ascertain those sorts of things. What I can tell you is that the training that I've had the ability to go to over the last 7 or 8 years in judicial conferences, they spend a lot of time on that and have spent a lot of time on that. There's training that is constantly given to us, and we do our very best to try and ensure that everyone is treated equally, and that's absolutely going to be the case in my courtroom.
Brandon, would you like to respond?
I would just add that I think the insidious part of systemic racism is that you don't see it. It's not something that is easily identified by looking out. It's not active. Again, it's something that we have to be intentional about and can't be passive. And so I would certainly pledge to do everything I could to make that an intentional, ongoing effort.
And Mike, you have 30 seconds if you'd like to add something to that.
I know there's been some arguments and some discussions about sentencing and those sorts of things. What I would say about that, however, is that sentencing is largely controlled by the guidelines that the legislature has put in place. And so most judges are constrained by the guidelines first and foremost, without regard to race or gender at all.
Thank you. We're going to move on to another audience question. And this is about nonviolent offenders. And we're going to start with, I believe we're starting with Brandon on this question. Do you feel drug-addicted defendants belong in jail if their crime is nonviolent? 60 seconds.
I think that we need to treat addiction as a medical condition. I think that's the beginning of that. And again, let me clarify, superior courts do not make policy. And as Mike said before, sentencing guidelines are sentencing guidelines. Superior courts are mandated to follow the law, whether that's the RCW or that's case law from a higher court. But there are certainly arguments to be made, if for no other reason from a fiscal standpoint, and the cost of warehousing folks who have committed nonviolent offenses that are related to addiction. I think the best thing we can do as a society is to look at drug addiction as a medical issue before we look at it as a criminal issue.
Mike, to you, 60 seconds.
One of the things that our courts have done, and I think Judge Wolfram and Judge Lorman have taken the lead on this because it's relatively recent, are things called drug courts. And they endeavor to get people who are charged with crimes into drug treatment, because we all win if the person becomes clean and sober. Not only the person, but society. And so people need to be given that opportunity. Having said that, if they do not take that opportunity, there need to be some consequences, because that will be as much of a factor in getting them clean and sober as anything else.
Brandon, your response.
I would echo the importance of programs like drug court. It's a good first step. I think, as we discussed before, funding is an issue when it comes to bed space in treatment facilities and other aspects. But it all starts with treating addiction as a medical condition and understanding that it's the addiction that causes the crime, not that it's criminals who are necessarily out addicted to drugs. So I would agree with Mike that that's an important step with drug court.
And Mike, would you like to close us out with this question?
Only that I think it is a problem that is not going to go away, and the more we are able to address it, the better, I think, for society.
So this question is about work stress, which I think is something that we all have experienced. Legal work can be quite stressful, day in and day out, especially for judges who hear conflicts between parties, render difficult and often controversial decisions, and unfortunately see people at their lowest moments. And starting with you, Mike, how do you plan to manage your stress and your workload on the bench if you are elected?
I think people who know me know that I work very long hours to begin with, and the bench may actually be shorter hours than I currently practice. Having said that, I've got terrific clients and I love to help them. I've often said that being an attorney is kind of like being a doctor or a dentist. You generally don't see happy people. They're coming to see you because somebody's died, or they're thinking about planning their death, or they're getting divorced, or they're suing somebody. And so the nature of being a lawyer and by extension a judge, where you have to make those decisions, is stressful. I've been athletically inclined all my life. I try and go to the Y when I can, when it's open 3 or 4 times a week, and I continue to do that even when it's not open by doing workouts at home and outdoors. So I'm ready to go.
Brandon, to you, tell us about how to manage stress.
Well, there's no doubt stress is certainly a part of the legal system for all actors, including judicial officers. Fortunately or not, I suppose, depending on how you look at it, I have plenty of experience with stress, from researching novel issues as a law clerk, to meeting deadlines as part of a busy litigation practice, to mediating for people in dysfunctional relationships or who are struggling with mental illness or addiction issues. Each comes with its own kind of stress. On the other hand, helping people with the hardest and often most important struggles in their life also comes with its own reward. I was once told that practicing family law was a, quote, waste of my talents. I could not disagree more. While there is no doubt that practicing family law can be messy, it is also helping people with the most real and personal parts of their lives. For me to manage, I like to ride my bicycle, spend time in the mountains, and hang out with my family. There's no doubt that this is a stressful line of work, but the ability to help people makes it more than worth it.
Mike, anything you'd like to add?
Only that I don't get out in the golf course as much as I'd like, but that's sometimes more stressful than where I just came from, because I don't play very well sometimes. But I think all of us endeavor to relieve stress in any way that's enjoyable, and the COVID thing has made it more stressful for everybody now. And I think however we can alleviate that is best for all concerned.
And Brandon, you have 30 seconds to close us out of this question.
I would agree with Mike that golf is too stressful. He should take up bicycling. Much better stress reliever.
Okay, I think we've got time for a couple more questions before we move on to closing statements. This is an audience question about COVID, and we're going to start with Brandon on this question. How do you feel about the release of prisoners during COVID, whereas they are being released due to age without regard to their offense?
Well, I get to punt a little bit because the Superior Court doesn't make those determinations. Those are made by the Department of Corrections. I think obviously public safety is important, and that includes the safety of people who are incarcerated. To the extent that offenders can be released in a way that is safe for the community and makes their life safer, that it's definitely something that should be explored. I think there's arguments that can be made for that process outside of the pandemic, to be honest. And I think reform of our criminal justice system is something that should be continually looked at in a lot of areas.
Mike, you have the floor, 60 seconds.
I largely agree. I mean, this is not something that we have any control over, really, as a Superior Court judge. This is a Department of Corrections and/or governor issue. Our function is we're a trial court. We're the ones that probably put them there, and so there are obviously situations where things have to change. The criminal justice system is the subject of constant study as to whether it should be reformed, and that's really not something that I feel like I have much control over as a Superior Court judge.
And Brandon, you have 30 seconds if you have anything to add to that question.
I would agree with what Mike said. My degree is in criminal justice. Corrections is something that I've studied, and I, unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, Superior Court judges, that's not their purview. Our purview is to call balls and strikes, apply the law fairly and equally to everyone, and allow the DOC and the governor to make those types of policy decisions.
And Mike, if you'd like to close us out.
I really don't have anything further to add.
Great. Covered a lot of ground. Our time is up. We're going to move on to closing statements. Mike, you will go first. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I've been a practicing lawyer for over 42 years. I started out as a prosecutor trying cases for the County of Walla Walla as a prosecutor, criminal cases largely. I then became a defense attorney trying the same cases from the other side of the fence. I have significant criminal law experience over the years. I have significant juvenile experience over the years. I have done numerous, if not hundreds of trials involving all sorts of cases over my career. I've been involved in jury trials on numerous occasions on both sides of the aisle. The Superior Court is a trial court, and I believe that the best way to prepare yourself to be a Superior Court judge is to engage in trial work. That's basically been my life as a lawyer for over 40 years. I also have had training judicially in 2013, having gone to a week-long judicial college so that I could act as court commissioner for the last roughly 8 years. I'm ready to go, and I can hit the ground running to help address the significant backlog of cases that we have as a result of the virus. And we have a significant backlog of cases. I'm not going to require any training in that regard because I basically handled every type of case that the Superior Court deals with. COVID has created a problem which is going to have to be addressed and addressed quickly, and I would like to help the County of Walla Walla do that. I think I'm as well qualified as anyone to do that, and I would appreciate your vote. I would tell the audience if there's anything further you wish to find out about me, you can go to my website, which is MikeMitchellForJudge.com. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. And Brandon, you have the floor.
Thank you, Bertha. My opponent touts his years of trial experience, and unfortunately, there's been some implication that I lack experience, and that is simply not true. According to the county clerk's office, from 2010 to 2014, a time period when we were both in private practice as litigators, I was counsel of record on 250 Superior Court cases compared to my opponent's 129 cases. I have trial experience in Walla Walla County, Benton Franklin counties, and Yakima County. I am ready to serve as Walla Walla's next Superior Court judge. Judges preside over trials. They do not try cases. It is a different skill set. Being a good football player does not mean you will be a good coach. I believe experience is measured by more than just the calendar. I have had a diverse 20-year career, including as a judge pro tem, mediator, and arbitrator, which is serving as a private judge, evaluating evidence, ruling on motions, and making final decisions. I will be ready to serve as Superior Court judge on day one. I believe a person's first job out of school has a big influence on their career. Mine was working for the court, not trying to advocate a position to make money or make a name for myself, but to get to the right result, to give parties justice. I went to law school to become an attorney because I want to help people. I transitioned my practice to mediation and arbitration because it allowed me to help a greater number of people than serving as an advocate for one side in litigation. I want to return to public service to give back to our community by being a hardworking, fair judge who treats everyone with dignity and respect. I promise to apply the law to the facts without regard to who is appearing before me, and that means I promise to make everyone upset at some point. But that is part of being a good judge, ignoring popular opinion, personal beliefs, and outside influences, and instead just striving to get to the right result. If elected, I pledge to be a judge for everyone. I thank you again for your time tonight and for your vote. And if there's more information you'd like to have, johnsonforjudge2020.com. Thank you.
All right, thank you both. Thank you both for your cooperation.